Cassie groaned as she pulled herself out of the wreckage, her head throbbing. Smoke curled from the shattered remains of her ship, the heat distorting the air in shimmering waves. Her oxygen gauge blinked red, critical levels. She sucked in a ragged breath and scanned the unfamiliar terrain. Towering, bioluminescent trees loomed above, their sprawling roots twisting over mossy ground. Strange, chittering sounds echoed from the foliage. The air was thick with humidity, tinged with an earthy, almost metallic scent. This was Kesra 7, a planet classified as highly hazardous by the Galactic Survey Corps. Her stomach tightened. No distress beacon, no immediate hope for rescue. She was stranded. Cassie activated her wrist scanner, its flickering display confirming the worst. The atmosphere was breathable, but riddled with microbial life. And her ship's rations? Either burned or scattered. She was alone, and she had maybe 2 days before dehydration set in. She slung her survival pack over her shoulder, eyes darting to the shadows between the trees. The jungle was alive with movement, unseen creatures rustling, watching. She needed shelter. That was when the bushes rustled. Cassie spun, heart hammering. From the underbrush, something moved. A figure stepped forward. Not an animal. A person. The being stood at roughly Cassie's height, her slender body clad in what looked like woven organic fibers, shifting like living fabric. But what struck Cassie most were her eyes. Large, luminescent, a swirling mix of violet and silver. Her skin shimmered faintly in the dim jungle light, smooth and pale blue, with a subtle translucence beneath which faint, pulsing veins could be seen. She wasn't human. Cassie instinctively took a step back, gripping a jagged metal rod from the wreckage. The alien girl tilted her head, then spoke. In perfect standard galactic. You are hurt. Your nutrients are low. Cassie's breath caught. The voice was soft, lilting, not hostile, but the words, nutrients? What are you? Cassie rasped, her throat dry. The girl placed a hand against her own chest, fingers splaying over her skin. I am Irlan. You are not of this place. Cassie swallowed. No, my ship crashed. Irlan studied the wreckage, her expression shifting. That is unfortunate. Then she took a step closer. You will not survive without sustenance. You need to share with me. Cassie stiffened. Share what? Irlan blinked, then spoke with complete sincerity. Your energy. I will host your nutrients inside me. It is the only way. Cassie just stared. Wait, inside me? What does that even mean? Irlan's glowing gaze flickered with something Cassie couldn't quite decipher. Curiosity? Amusement? Pity? You do not understand, Irlan murmured. Your body is weakening. I can sustain you. Cassie clenched her jaw. She didn't like the sound of inside me, but her body was weakening. If she didn't find water and food soon, she'd be in real trouble. Explain, Cassie said warily. Irlan raised her arm, rolling back the sleeve of her strange organic garment. Cassie inhaled sharply. Beneath her pale blue skin, something moved. Thin, translucent veins pulsed with a faint glow, shifting rhythmically. It was as though her circulatory system was alive. Not just a network of blood vessels, but something more. My species, Irlan said, does not consume as you do. We do not eat. We do not drink. We take in nutrients through bonding. Cassie stiffened. Bonding? You mean, like a parasite? Irlan tilted her head. No, a symbiote. We share. Cassie's mind raced. She had read about organisms like this before. Creatures that could sustain themselves through biochemical exchange. But sentient, humanoid beings that did the same? How does it work? She asked, cautious but intrigued. Irlan stepped closer. Cassie didn't move away this time. If you allow it, Irlan said, I will extend my filaments into your body. They will absorb what you do not need, and in return, they will give you hydration, nourishment, and healing. Cassie swallowed. It sounded insane. It also sounded scientifically fascinating. And if I say no? Irlan's luminous eyes softened. Then your body will fail. A choice. Or no choice at all. Cassie exhaled, then nodded. Do it. Irlan knelt beside her, lifting one of Cassie's hands with delicate fingers. Her touch was cool, almost electric. "Relax," Irlan murmured. Cassie braced herself. Irlan's wrist shimmered, and then, thin, translucent filaments emerged. They were like glowing threads, delicate yet alive, shifting toward Cassie's skin. She barely had time to react before they sank into her flesh. A jolt shot through her arm. It wasn't pain, exactly. More like a deep, pulsing warmth spreading up her veins. A rush of energy surged through her body, replacing the gnawing exhaustion. Her mind swam with strange sensations, not just her own, but Irlan's. She felt hunger, not hers, but Irlan's craving for connection. She felt relief, not hers, but Irlan's satisfaction in completing the bond. For the first time since crashing, Cassie didn't feel weak. She felt alive. And when Irlan finally pulled back, severing the connection, Cassie gasped, her heart pounding. Irlan watched her, expression unreadable. "You see now," she said softly, "we are stronger together." Cassie's fingers trembled as she stared at the faint, glowing marks on her skin where the filaments had been. She had just become something more than human. And deep in the jungle, something else had noticed. Cassie exhaled slowly, flexing her fingers as the strange warmth faded. The faint luminescent traces left by Irlan's filaments shimmered before dimming entirely, leaving nothing but smooth skin. She felt stable, stronger. The haze of dehydration and hunger had receded, replaced by a strange, almost effervescent energy coursing through her. She stared at Irlan, breath still uneven. That was wild. Irlan's violet-silver eyes reflected the faint glow of the jungle. "Your body is adapting," she said simply. "It will be easier next time." "Next time?" Cassie repeated warily. "Our bond is not permanent, but while you remain on Kesra, 7, you will need to sustain it," Irlan explained, standing gracefully. "I will require energy to maintain my strength, and in return, I will keep you nourished and healed. It is mutual." Cassie hesitated. A living, breathing nutrient exchange system? The sheer scientific implications were staggering, but the practicality of it sent her mind racing. Then, the underbrush shifted. A deep, guttural chuff vibrated through the air, a low, reverberating growl that sent ice through Cassie's veins. Irlan's expression darkened. "We are being watched." Cassie's survival instincts kicked in. She grabbed the jagged metal rod from earlier, her knuckles whitening. A pair of eyes, glowing amber and too large to belong to anything friendly, peered from between the trees. Then another, and another. The jungle wasn't just alive. It was hunting them. The first creature emerged from the foliage, its massive, sinewy form prowling forward on 6 powerful limbs. Its hide was thick and ridged, dark green like the jungle around it, adapting to the environment like natural camouflage. But its mouth, a vertical slit lined with rows of jagged, serrated teeth, opened in a slow, deliberate display of hunger. Then the second appeared. Then the third. Cassie's pulse slammed against her ribs. "You have a plan, right?" she whispered. Irlan was already moving. Her slender fingers spread, and from her forearms, the faint luminescent filaments, the same ones she had used to bond with Cassie, extended outward like delicate tendrils. "Do not let them touch your skin," she warned. Cassie didn't need to be told twice. The creatures circled them, predatory, intelligent. Their amber eyes gleamed as they tested their prey, waiting for an opening. One lunged. Irlan reacted instantly, her filaments whipping forward with inhuman precision. The moment they made contact with the creature's thick hide, it screamed. Cassie barely had time to process what was happening. The alien beast convulsed violently, its muscles spasming as if every nerve in its body had been ignited at once. Its glowing amber eyes burst like overripe fruit, spilling bioluminescent ichor down its face as it thrashed, gurgling. Then it collapsed. The jungle fell into eerie silence. Cassie stared. What the hell was that? Irlan stood over the still-twitching body, her filaments retracting back into her skin. "I told you," she said, her voice calm. "We are stronger together." The remaining creatures hesitated. Their glowing eyes flickered between Irlan and the fresh corpse of their packmate, their reptilian bodies shivering with uncertainty. Then, almost simultaneously, they took a step back. Cassie's grip on the metal rod loosened slightly. "They're leaving," she whispered. "They understand now," Irlan murmured. "They are not the only predators here." Cassie exhaled, her muscles still tense. "Predators." She looked at Irlan again, truly looked at her. The alien girl appeared delicate, ethereal even. But there was something else beneath her skin. Something dangerous. "What did you do to it?" Cassie asked, glancing at the lifeless beast. Irlan met her gaze, unblinking. "I disrupted its nervous system," she said matter-of-factly. "Overloaded it with signals it could not process. It felt more pain than it had ever known. And then it died." Cassie swallowed. "Holy shit." Irlan tilted her head slightly, observing her reaction. "Does this disturb you?" Cassie hesitated. Should it? She had just witnessed something incredibly lethal, a power that bypassed physical strength entirely. And yet, without Irlan, she'd already be dead. She forced herself to shake her head. "No," she said, honestly. Irlan's glowing lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. "Good." The jungle remained still as they moved deeper, but Cassie could feel it watching. The trees, the unseen predators lurking beyond the glowing flora. "Where are we going?" Cassie finally asked. "To my dwelling," Irlan said. "You must recover fully before we search for a way off this planet." Cassie's eyes flickered toward the alien girl beside her. "You're helping me escape?" Irlan gave her a sidelong glance. "You are my bonded partner now, are you not?" The way she said it made Cassie's stomach tighten with something she didn't quite understand. Before she could dwell on it, a distant sound rumbled through the jungle. Not an animal. Something else. A deep, mechanical hum. Cassie's heart nearly stopped. "Wait, that sounds like—" "A ship," Irlan confirmed. Cassie's pulse leapt. "Rescue?" Hope surged through her, but then she saw Irlan's expression. It wasn't relief. It was unease. "What is it?" Cassie asked. Irlan's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "That is not a friendly vessel," she said quietly. Cassie's stomach dropped. The ship's distant thrusters grew louder. Something, or someone, was coming, and it wasn't here to save them. Cassie's heart pounded as she peered through the thick foliage, her breath shallow. The jungle canopy trembled under the force of approaching thrusters, their mechanical whine cutting through the humid air like a blade. A ship. A real, functioning ship. This was her way off Kesra, 7. But Irlan's posture was rigid, her glowing violet-silver eyes fixed on the sky, her expression unreadable. "You don't look happy about this," Cassie muttered. Irlan's voice was steady but low. "Because I know that ship, and I know what they are." Cassie followed her gaze as the dark shape of the vessel pierced the treetops, branches snapping as the thrusters kicked up a storm of dust and glowing spores. The ship was sleek, predatory. Matte black plating gleamed under the planet's twin moons, adorned with a single crimson insignia, a coiled serpent with jagged, dripping fangs. Cassie's stomach twisted. She knew that symbol. "No," she whispered. Irlan glanced at her. "You recognize them?" Cassie swallowed hard. "Yeah, and that's not a rescue party. The Crimson Maw, a notorious syndicate of slavers, mercenaries, and organ traffickers who thrived in the lawless fringes of space. They weren't explorers. They weren't rescuers. They were hunters." Cassie crouched lower, gripping Irlan's wrist. "We have to move. Now." Irlan didn't resist, but her gaze remained locked on the descending ship. "They will scan the wreckage first," she murmured. "We have minutes, no more." Cassie didn't waste time arguing. She turned and pushed through the underbrush, ignoring the scratch of thick vines and the faint glow of bioluminescent spores swirling in the air. "Run. Get distance. Get away." The ship touched down with a heavy thud, its landing struts sinking into the jungle floor. A loud metallic hiss followed, a ramp lowering. Cassie risked a glance back. Figures emerged from the darkness, their armor plated in dark red and black alloys, their visors reflecting the eerie glow of the jungle. They moved with precision, sweeping the area with rifles far too advanced for simple scavengers. Cassie clenched her teeth. They were looking for survivors. "If they capture us," she started. "They won't," Irlan interrupted. her voice unwavering. "Follow me." Cassie didn't question it. Irlan led her through the dense vegetation, her movements swift and silent, as if she were part of the jungle itself. Cassie struggled to keep up, the terrain uneven, the roots twisting like hidden traps beneath her feet. Then, without warning, Irlan stopped. Before Cassie could question why, Irlan pressed her hand against a section of a thick tree trunk. Something clicked. The ground beneath them shuddered. Cassie stumbled as a section of the earth split open, revealing a hidden tunnel entrance, narrow, organic-looking, as if the very jungle itself had carved the space. "Inside," Irlan commanded. Cassie hesitated only for a second before diving in. Irlan followed, and the opening sealed behind them. Darkness swallowed them whole. For a moment, there was only the sound of Cassie's own breath, rapid and uneven. Then, the tunnel came alive. Soft, pulsing blue lights flickered to life along the walls, illuminating the space. Cassie turned in awe, her fingers brushing over the strange, organic surface. "What is this place?" she whispered. "A sanctuary," Irlan answered. "One of many my kind built long ago. They will not find us here." Cassie exhaled, her heart still hammering. Safe. For now. But outside, the Crimson Maw was still hunting. And they would not stop until they found something, or someone, worth taking. Cassie pressed her back against the curved tunnel wall, forcing herself to take slow, steady breaths. The walls pulsed faintly, the soft blue luminescence flickering in an unsettling rhythm, like the heartbeat of something alive. "How many of these tunnels are there?" she asked, voice hushed. Irlan's violet-silver eyes reflected the dim glow as she ran her fingers along the textured surface. "Dozens, perhaps hundreds. They are remnants of my people's old dwellings. We built beneath the surface to avoid predators." Cassie frowned. "Your people? But I thought—" she hesitated. "Are there others like you here?" A shadow passed over Irlan's face. "No." The single word carried centuries of weight. Cassie's stomach tightened. "You mean you're the last?" Irlan turned away, her expression unreadable. "We must keep moving." Cassie let it drop, for now. The passage sloped downward, curving into the earth. The walls weren't stone, nor metal, but something in between. A smooth, organic structure that felt almost like hardened cartilage under Cassie's fingertips. It was damp, but not unpleasant, exuding a faintly metallic scent. "Did your people build these tunnels?" Cassie asked, keeping pace beside Irlan. "In a way," Irlan replied. "They grew them." Cassie stopped. "Grew them?" Irlan glanced at her, tilting her head slightly. "You have seen my filaments. My people once extended such growths into the earth, expanding the tunnels as needed. The walls are what remains of their presence." Cassie shivered. The walls were once living. She ran her fingers along the surface again, suppressing a shudder. How much of this place was still alive? Above them, the jungle remained eerily still. The Crimson Maw had fanned out, their dark forms moving in disciplined formation. Their leader, a towering figure clad in segmented crimson armor, knelt beside the wreckage of Cassie's ship. He ran a gauntlet hand over the scorched hull, fingers tracing the deep fractures along the plating. A subordinate approached, rifle slung over his back. "No bodies, sir. But we found footprints heading into the jungle." The leader tilted his helmeted head. "2 sets?" "Yes, sir. 1 human, 1 unknown." A low chuckle emitted from behind the leader's visor. "Interesting." His fingers twitched, and from his armor, a swarm of mechanical drones unfolded, tiny, insect-like machines, their optics flashing red as they lifted into the air. "Spread out," the leader ordered. "Find them." The jungle obeyed. Deep underground, Cassie felt an odd sensation tugging at her chest. Not pain, not fear, but something foreign. It was as if she could sense Irlan's unease, feel the faint ripple of her thoughts beneath the surface of her own. "They are searching," Irlan murmured. Cassie frowned. "How do you know?" Irlan touched her wrist, the same spot where the filaments had connected before. "You feel it, don't you?" Cassie stiffened. She did. A deep, underlying sense of awareness. It wasn't like telepathy, not exactly, but she could faintly feel Irlan's presence inside her mind. Like a whisper in the back of her skull, a gentle pull towards something greater than herself. Our bond is growing, Irlan said. Cassie exhaled. What did that mean? Is this permanent? She asked. Irlan hesitated. It depends. On what? On whether you choose to keep it. The way she said it made Cassie's stomach twist in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. Before she could press further, a deep vibrating hum rattled through the tunnels. Cassie tensed. What was that? Irlan's eyes darkened. They have found the entrance. Cassie's survival instincts kicked in. Do we have another exit? She asked quickly. Irlan didn't respond immediately. Her glowing gaze flickered toward the tunnel walls, her fingers splaying against the pulsing surface. The humming above intensified. The Crimson Maw's drones. We must go deeper, Irlan finally said. Cassie cursed under her breath, but followed without hesitation. The passage narrowed as they descended, the walls shifting slightly under Irlan's touch. It felt like the tunnel recognized her. Cassie didn't have time to dwell on it. A sharp clang echoed through the underground. Then another. Cassie's breath caught in her throat. They were cutting through. We need to move faster. Irlan turned sharply down another passage. This one darker, the blue luminescence dimming as the space tightened around them. Where are we going? Cassie asked. To a place they cannot follow, Irlan said. Cassie wasn't sure if that reassured her. Behind them, the first metallic thud of boots hitting the tunnel floor sent a surge of adrenaline through her veins. The Crimson Maw was inside, and they weren't going to stop until they found what they were looking for. Cassie ran. The walls of the tunnel seemed to breathe around her, pulsing faintly in response to Irlan's presence. Each step sent echoes through the confined space, but behind them, the rhythmic clang of armored boots was getting closer. The Crimson Maw was inside, and they were hunting. How far does this tunnel go? Cassie whispered between breaths. Far enough, Irlan murmured, her voice eerily calm. Cassie risked a glance back. In the dim blue glow of the tunnel, shadows flickered, tall, armored figures moving like wraiths. Their visors pulsed red, scanning the air, tracking every particle, every heat signature. One of them lifted a hand. Shit. Cassie barely had time to react before a pulse round shrieked through the tunnel. Irlan moved before Cassie could blink. She turned sharply, her arm extending, and the filaments shot forth. The energy round hit the filaments mid-air, then stopped. Cassie's breath caught as she watched the bullet-like plasma pulse freeze, caught within the delicate strands. For a heartbeat, it just hung there, as if reality itself had buckled around it. Then, the filaments redirected it. The plasma round shot backward, straight into the nearest Maw soldier's helmet. A muffled scream rang through the tunnel as the soldier staggered, his visor shattering in a violent burst of light and flesh. The others hesitated. Cassie stared at Irlan in open shock. Irlan didn't give her time to process. She grabbed Cassie's wrist and ran. The tunnel twisted into tighter, more jagged spaces, the air thickening with an odd bioelectric charge. Cassie felt the hairs on her arms rise, her skin tingling in response. Where are we going? She hissed. Somewhere they cannot follow, Irlan repeated. Cassie wasn't convinced. Behind them, the Crimson Maw regrouped. Their leader's voice rang through the tunnel, a deep, metallic growl dripping with amusement. That was impressive, alien, he called. But you can't run forever. Cassie clenched her jaw. Yeah, she muttered. Watch us. Irlan stopped abruptly. Cassie nearly slammed into her. Why did we? Then she saw it. The tunnel ended. Not in a wall, not in a collapse, but in something far worse. The space ahead was no longer a tunnel. It was a chamber, vast and dimly pulsing with deep violet light. The walls here were different. They didn't just pulse, they shifted. Cassie's stomach turned. What the hell is this? Irlan exhaled. The heart chamber, she whispered. Cassie turned toward her. The what? Irlan didn't answer immediately. She placed a hand on the nearest wall, and the entire chamber seemed to respond. The walls contracted, their slow pulse deepening, almost like a heartbeat. Cassie stepped back. The tunnel was alive. No, this entire place was alive. Irlan's voice was soft. This is where my people were born. Cassie felt something cold settle in her stomach. Were. Irlan turned to face her fully, the dim light casting sharp shadows across her face. This is the last living piece of my species, she said quietly, and it will protect us. Cassie barely had time to register those words before the tunnel behind them began to close. The Crimson Maw arrived just in time to see the walls begin to shift. They're sealing it off, one of them barked. The leader stepped forward, his crimson armor gleaming under the violet glow. He didn't panic. He simply lifted one hand and made a gesture. A soldier stepped up with a plasma drill. Cassie's eyes widened. They're going to burn through. Irlan inhaled deeply. Then, for the first time since Cassie met her, she smiled. No, Irlan whispered. They will not. Then she pressed her palm to the wall, and the chamber reacted. The walls shuddered. The soft, pulsing glow flared violently, shifting from violet to deep crimson. And then, it began to move. Cassie barely stifled a scream as the walls opened up, forming new tendrils, thick, sinewy structures that extended like grasping limbs. The Maw soldiers hesitated. Then the first tendril struck. It lashed forward, wrapping around one soldier's throat before he could even react. The armored man thrashed, his rifle clattering to the ground. But the wall didn't just strangle him. It absorbed him. His armor caved in like it was being compressed by an unseen force, and then he was gone. The others opened fire. Cassie hit the ground as plasma rounds exploded across the shifting walls. But it didn't stop them. The chamber devoured the energy, growing stronger. Irlan turned to Cassie, her silver-violet eyes flashing. Stay close to me, she commanded. Cassie nodded without hesitation. The chamber wasn't just alive. It was hungry. And the Maw soldiers? They had just walked into its feeding ground. Cassie watched, transfixed, as the heart chamber fought back. Tendrils lashed through the air, tearing into the Maw soldiers with precision, not just killing them, but pulling them into the walls, absorbing them, digesting them. The leader, the only one still standing, took a slow step back, his crimson visor reflecting the horror before him. For the first time, he looked uncertain. He turned sharply to run. Irlan raised a hand. The walls shifted instantly. A new tunnel sealed off his escape. He turned, plasma rifle raised. But Irlan was already moving. Her filaments extended, wrapping around his weapon and short-circuiting it instantly. He barely had time to react before Irlan was in front of him. Cassie saw it then, the full truth of what Irlan was. Not just a survivor, not just a symbiote, but a predator. The leader exhaled heavily. What are you? He rasped. Irlan's filaments curled around his throat. She leaned in close, her voice a whisper. Something you cannot fight. The walls swallowed him whole. Cassie shuddered as the chamber finally stilled, the glow fading back to violet. The tendrils retracted, the walls smoothing over as if nothing had happened. The Maw was gone. Silence fell. Irlan turned to Cassie, her expression unreadable. Now, she said softly, we find your way home. Cassie wasn't sure if she wanted to go home anymore. The walls of the heart chamber pulsed in slow, deep rhythms, settling back into eerie stillness. The air was thick with the lingering scent of something metallic and organic, a fusion of life and death Cassie couldn't quite describe. She swallowed hard. The Crimson Maw was gone. Not just dead. They had been absorbed, their presence erased from existence like they had never been there. Cassie turned toward Irlan, who stood perfectly still, her glowing violet-silver gaze unreadable. The filaments that had torn through the Maw leader's weapon, his armor, his flesh were now retracting, slithering back into her skin like something alive. Cassie exhaled slowly. You absorb them. Irlan didn't blink. Yes, they were people. Irlan tilted her head slightly. They were threats. Cassie stared at her. The way she had said it, so matter-of-factly, so final. No hesitation, no remorse. And yet, Cassie felt no disgust. She should have. She should have felt horrified. But what she felt instead was something else. Something deep in her gut. Something cold, something primal. A flicker of understanding. She took a breath. What happens now? Irlan stepped forward, closing the space between them. Now, she said softly, I keep my promise. Cassie's throat tightened. What promise? Irlan's fingertips brushed against her wrist. The moment her skin touched Cassie's, the bond flared. Cassie felt it. The connection between them, deeper than before, sharper, more vivid. It wasn't just a sense of shared awareness anymore. It was more. She could feel Irlan's presence inside her. Not intruding, not controlling, but part of her. The same way the heart chamber had consumed its prey. Only this time, Cassie wasn't being consumed. She was being changed. Cassie's breath hitched as heat spread through her veins. Not pain, not fear, something else. She felt stronger, sharper. She lifted a hand, staring at her own skin. It looked the same, but beneath the surface, she could feel something different, something shifting. What did you do to me? She whispered. Irlan studied her carefully. The bond has deepened. How deep? Irlan exhaled, brushing a strand of shimmering white hair behind her ear. You are no longer simply a host. You are connected. To me. To this place. Cassie's heartbeat quickened. She should have been afraid, but she wasn't. Instead, a question formed in her mind, unbidden. What if I don't want to leave? Irlan blinked. Cassie didn't recognize her own voice. The words had come from her lips, but the feeling behind them, the instinct, was something new. A hunger. Not for food, not for water, but for something more. Irlan's lips curved slightly. Then she whispered, You won't have to. Cassie's own words echoed in her mind. What if I don't want to leave? The question had left her lips before she could stop it, before she could think. But now that it was out, she couldn't take it back. And the worst part? She wasn't sure she wanted to. Irlan stood before her, silent, watching. The glow of the heart chamber flickered in the strange, rhythmic pulse. Cassie was beginning to understand. Not just visually, but viscerally. The chamber was alive. And so was she. But not the same as before. Cassie flexed her fingers, feeling the subtle hum beneath her skin. A presence, not intrusive, not suffocating, but undeniable. Irlan was inside her now. Not in a way that felt parasitic. In a way that felt right. She swallowed, voice barely above a whisper. What did you mean when you said I'm connected? That I'm not just a host anymore? Irlan took a slow step forward, closing the space between them. You accepted the bond, she murmured. Now it is changing you. Cassie's pulse spiked. Changing me how? Irlan reached out, her fingertips barely brushing Cassie's wrist. The moment they touched, Cassie felt it. A rush. A pulse of something foreign, something ancient, threading through her body like a whisper of static beneath her skin. Her breath hitched. Her vision blurred for a second. Not darkness, but awareness. She could sense Irlan, not just standing before her but inside her mind, inside her bloodstream, inside the very fibers of her being. It wasn't invasive. It was natural, like it had always been meant to happen. Irlan's glowing eyes searched hers. Do you feel it? She asked softly. Cassie could only nod. Because she did. And she wanted more. Cassie was a scientist. She knew she should have been panicking. She should have been analyzing this, rationalizing it, fighting it. But the truth was, she didn't want to fight it. She licked her lips, pulse pounding. If I keep this bond, then you will no longer be fully human. Cassie's stomach tightened. She knew that already. She could feel it. The warmth in her veins. The heightened awareness. The way her body felt stronger, sharper, more alive than it ever had before. And the most terrifying part? She liked it. Irlan studied her expression carefully. You are not afraid. I should be. But you are not. Cassie took a slow, deep breath. No, she admitted. I'm not. The walls around them pulsed gently, almost approvingly. Cassie realized then, this place, this living place, wasn't just reacting to Irlan. It was reacting to her too. She looked down at her hands, flexing them again. Her skin still looked human. But beneath it, what was she becoming? Irlan reached out again, her fingers hovering just over Cassie's chest, over her heart. You can still choose, she murmured. The bond is not yet complete. If you wish to leave, truly leave, I will sever it. Cassie stared at her. Irlan was offering her a choice. A real one. She could walk away. She could leave this place, find a way back to human civilization, go home. Go back to being just human. But deep down, she already knew her answer. Because going back meant giving this up. The strength, the connection, the hunger. Cassie took a slow step forward. Irlan didn't move away. I don't want to sever it, Cassie whispered. Irlan's glowing eyes flashed. And then she smiled. Cassie's breath came faster now, not from fear, but from anticipation. You are certain? Irlan asked, voice softer now, more intimate. Cassie didn't hesitate. Yes. Irlan exhaled, and for the first time, Cassie felt something in her presence shift. It wasn't just connection anymore. It was acceptance. Irlan's filaments extended again, not cautiously this time, not hesitantly. Cassie didn't flinch. She let them in. The moment they touched her skin, the bond flared to life. But this time, it wasn't like before. This time, it was complete. Heat flooded Cassie's body, not burning, not painful, but awakening. Her senses expanded, her mind stretched, her pulse synchronized with Irlan's. The walls of the chamber shuddered, responding not just to Irlan, but to her. Cassie gasped as her vision shifted, her perception widening. She could feel the tunnels beyond, the jungle above, the pulsing veins of life that stretched across Kesra. 7. She wasn't just inside this place anymore. She was part of it. Her knees almost buckled. Irlan caught her, hands steady. Breathe, she murmured. Cassie did. And when she looked up again, Irlan's smile had grown. It is done, she whispered. Cassie lifted a hand and felt the power thrumming beneath her skin. No longer just human, no longer just herself. Something more, something new. Cassie exhaled, and she smiled back. Cassie stood in silence, her fingers flexing, her breath slow and deliberate. She could feel it now, everything. The jungle above, the tunnels stretching deep into the earth, the rhythmic pulse of the heart chamber itself. It was no longer just a place. It was her. She turned her hand over, watching as faint, bioluminescent traces flickered beneath her skin. Not just veins anymore, but something more intricate, more alive. Something not human. She should have been afraid, but instead, she felt whole. Irlan stepped closer, watching her with a quiet, knowing gaze. You feel it now, don't you? She murmured. Cassie swallowed, nodding. Yeah, I do. She didn't just feel Irlan's presence. She could sense her, inside her mind, her body, as if their thoughts and instincts were now threaded together like woven fibers. Not two separate beings. One. Cassie inhaled. How much of me is still me? Irlan's head tilted slightly. You are still Cassie, but you are also more. Cassie exhaled. More. She liked the sound of that. Far above, in the dense jungle, something stirred. A drone, damaged but still functional, crawled through the underbrush. Its tiny, mechanical legs twitched as it processed its final recording. The last moments of the Crimson Maw strike team. The last words of its leader. What are you? Then screams. Then nothing. The drone's failing optics scanned the wreckage of Cassie's ship. Its emergency transmitter pulsed weakly, sending out one final distress beacon. A signal. A warning. And somewhere, across the cold expanse of space, someone received it. Cassie turned to Irlan. So what now? Irlan studied her carefully. What do you wish to do? Cassie thought about it. She thought about Earth, about the human colonies, about everything she had left behind. The idea of returning to them, to her old life, her old self, felt distant, like a memory of someone else. She looked at her hands again, at the glow beneath her skin. I don't belong there anymore, do I? She asked. Irlan's gaze softened. No. Cassie nodded slowly. She had suspected as much. But there was no sadness, no regret, only certainty. She turned back toward the chamber walls, placing her palm against them. The entire place responded, shifting to her touch as if recognizing her as its own. No, not as its own, as one of its creators. A shiver ran down Cassie's spine. She understood now. This planet wasn't just Irlan's home. It was their home. A new beginning. A new purpose. Cassie exhaled, and when she looked at Irlan again, she didn't see an alien. She saw a partner, a teacher, a guide into something greater. We should prepare, Cassie said. Irlan's glowing eyes flickered. Prepare for what? Cassie's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. For the ones who will come looking. Epilogue. The first of many. Weeks passed. Cassie and Irlan expanded the heart chamber, deepening their connection to it, to the jungle, to the entire living network of Kesra. 7. Cassie no longer thought of herself as human. She was more. She was something new. And when the first human ship arrived, drawn by the Crimson Maw's lost distress beacon, she stood beside Irlan, watching the vessel descend. They had come expecting a stranded scientist. They would find something else entirely. Cassie smiled, feeling the pulse of the jungle inside her. Let them come. She was ready.